So thank you for all making that happen. I want to also introduce three council members. We have two from our housing subcommittee, Councilmember Chase and Vice Mayor Watkins, that are here up front. And also Councilmember Matthews, who's here in the back. And I think Dr. and Economic Development Director Bonnie Lipscomb is here. And I just think their attendance is an indication of really the importance that this has on our city and all the work that the city council has been taking to look at housing within our community and with our region. One of the things I wanted to do, in addition to welcoming you, is talk a little bit about some of the issues that are happening in our community. I know that you might have read some of the changes at the state law in regards to housing on school grounds. I've been meeting with the Santa Cruz City Schools District in terms of some of their projects that they're looking at. And I think it's important to look at this not as a city-centric issue, but one that's involving everyone in the community in all our region. The Santa Cruz City Schools has been really encouraging to look at development to help support teachers and school workers in our community. And for me, it's really important that we maintain our families, that we maintain our structure here to create an environment so that future generations can call Santa Cruz their home. I've been recently speaking at local government classes. I was at Harbor High this week, and earlier I was at Santa Cruz High. And I think one of the number one issues that some of the students do talk about is whether or not there'll be a place for students, that are there in school now here in their town moving forward. And so the decisions we make today will have a huge impact on future generations, the kids that are in school now. And so I think this meeting that we're having now and the breakout sessions will be an opportunity to help shape that future for tomorrow's generation. So at this point, I'd like to introduce County Supervisor Ryan Coonerty, who's also going to make some welcome remarks, and then we'll turn it over to Jane Barr.
Thanks, David. I'll be brief because I want you to get to the real work of addressing affordable housing in this community. I will say housing obviously is not just a city issue or even a county issue, it's a regional issue. And the efforts we're taking at the state, at the county level, I think we're making some important progress, simplifying codes, and then also we've got a new program where we'll pay people $40,000 if they build an affordable ADU unit on their property and keep it affordable for 30 years. We've seen a lot of uptake. One of the things we're seeing in the county is aging at 6 times the rate of the rest of the state. So we have a lot of seniors, an increasing number over years. These folks, by allowing them to build an affordable ADU, can age in place, create an income stream, allow people to allow a caregiver or a family member or just a friend to live there. It's a great opportunity. That, along with a series of efforts to partner with Habitat for Humanity and build more affordable housing, to coordinate with the city on homeless action plan initiatives to help that civic population, workforce housing for our own employees as well as other employees. So we are looking at a variety of solutions. There's no one solution to this, but I think that if we work collaboratively and if we identify resources, we'll have a tremendous opportunity to create the kind of community where people can afford to, as I was looking to do, to be born, raised, live, work, raise their kids and retire, right? And that's what a full community looks like. And so in order to do that, we're going to need to take a really strategic and and find the right investments in order to deal with our affordable housing. So here is somebody who knows a lot about affordable housing and the challenges and opportunities that come with it, but Jane Barr from Eden Housing.
Thank you. First, I wanted to say, does anyone need translation? Because we have people here who can translate. Raise your hand if you do. Okay, I think we're good on that. I'm Jane Barr. I'm with Eden Housing. We are a private nonprofit, affordable housing developer, corporate officer at Hayward. We have Monterey Bay region, and I head up that region covering 3 counties plus Morganhill and Gilroy. We have we're in 15 counties in the state with 150 projects. We house 22,000 people, and we have a wait list of 22,000 people. That's how bad things are. In this area, I'm going to name some of the Mid-Penn properties. I used to work for Mid-Penn a while back, and their St. Stephen's project has 40 units. They had 800 applications for that. 20 applications for everyone. They had a project recently in Monterey at 19 units. They had 393 applications, so about 20 applications for every 1 unit available. I think we're all aware that there's a housing crisis. That's the good news, that people are aware of it and realize we have to do something. It's gotten proportions that, you know, I like the comments David made about talking at the Harbor High and kids wondering if they can live here. My children don't. My children are both in education. One lives in Virginia and one lives down in Southern California. Fortunately, they're married, so they have 2 incomes. But it's very difficult to live here, and it wasn't a choice for them when they came out of college to come back here and be able to pay rent on teacher salaries. So I travel to visit my grandchildren. I'm not fortunate enough to see them weekly like a lot of other people are. And I think most of you either know the costs of the housing here. It's affecting you, it's affecting your children, other family members, or neighbors. So I don't think it's a question anymore of debating whether or not we have a housing crisis. There was a study in September 2017 from the California Budget Center, and it talked about 1 in 5 Californians struggle to get by. And we ranked first out of 50 states in the ability to pay for rent or buy a house. The overall cost of living in California largely reflects the state's high housing costs. There are other statistics. These are a little dated. There was a Berkeley study that talked about the rents in the U.S. The average median rent is $1,395, and this is for all size units. This is for a 1-bedroom and 2-bedroom. California, it's $2,373. Santa Cruz County, they have $2,889, and the city of Santa Cruz, $3,094. That's also a dated study. It was from December of 16. I know the rents are higher than that. It also talked about the median price to buy a house across the U.S. is $192,000. California is $483,000. This study showed that it was 700 and I think, I can't read my writing, I think 730,000 back in December 16. I know that's not right because the newspaper Sentinel just quoted 935,000 yesterday, I think it was. And the city of Santa Cruz was supposedly 793, so it's probably even higher here. So we are looking at only 18% of the county people can afford to live here on what they earn. And 62% spend more than 30% of their income on housing. And in that's for the county, and the city it's 68%. And once again, these are dated. And the percent who spend more than half of their income is at least 30%. So we've got a problem. A number of us got together after the elections in November of 2016. There were 3 measures in 3 different counties. Alameda and Santa Clara passed bonds. Alameda's bonds was $580 million. Santa Clara passed a $950 million bond. And San Mateo passed a half-cent sales tax to support housing. And we looked at those campaigns and we thought, you know, there's an issue up there with housing, but we know we share that same issue. And the housing costs are relative to the income of the people. So while our housing might cost less than the Bay Area, the ratio of the cost of our housing to our salaries is worse. So we really are impacted here. And I've heard that we're number 1 in the nation, number 4, it varies, but we're way up there at the wrong end of the scale. So a bunch of us got together and thought that we should work on this. We've been meeting for 18 months. There's a small steering committee of 12 plus or minus people, and a larger group of about 60 people. And we were comprised of people representing local businesses, nonprofits, all the jurisdictions, the 4 cities in the county, the health community, educational community, housing advocates, labor, Chamber of Commerce, Monterey Bay Academic Partnership, the Business Council, Farm Bureau, Housing Authority, and many other groups. So we tried to have a wide range of people to be in this larger group and to discuss. The smaller group met every month, if not a little bit more, and the larger group met about every 2 months. And we talked about what we could do to address the for sale housing being out of reach, the rents escalating, and it's a supply-demand problem. And it was especially hit hard, and it's much worse now because in 2008 we had a recession, and a lot of the development just stopped for a good 5 years, 6 years. We're seeing development come back now, but it didn't make economic sense at that period. So we lost 6 years of reduction in this county that should have been adding housing, and we're a growing county, with UCS a bit, but we can't blame UCSC on their own. We have families that are increasing, and our children want to stay here. So we got together, we talked about that, and we did a poll it was either August or September, about would there be support for a housing bond. And that poll came back favorably. A housing bond takes a 2/3 approval, and we're right at the cusp of that. And so just slightly over, if you were included those who said that they were inclined to vote for it, along with the ones that said yes, they would definitely vote for it. And that's what we want to talk about tonight. We want to talk about the community and this proposed bond. This is a proposal at this point. It does go to the county supervisors. They're the ones that have the right to put it on the ballot. And we think it's very important to hear from everyone about the support. And we want to find out in these community meetings. This is the 4th out of 5. The next one will be next Thursday night in Felton. So we want to find out from all the community what you think about it. We want to explain what it is and get feedback, because this is not set in stone at this point. But the proposal that we looked at in the bond measure was for the bond polling was for $250 million bond measure that has to be approved by the voters at 67% passage or 66.7%. And basically 4 different pots of money. The first pot would be affordable rental housing. That would probably be the largest pot of all the 4. And it would fund acquisition and development costs to build affordable housing. So the next pot is for home ownership. This would facilitate first-time home ownership and help homeowners keep their homes. First-time home ownership would be, example would be you want to buy a house, you've got 1% down, 5% down, whatever, but you don't have enough equity to come up with 20% down. So this could fill that gap, and you would get what was called a silent second loan, and that would be a loan to you at an interest rate of 3%, 5%, I'm not sure, what percentage interest rate, but it would be due in 30 years or upon sale if it's earlier. The idea of 30 years is at that point you paid off your first mortgage, and then you can repay this one back and continue payments on a new mortgage, or you could, or it would be due earlier if you sold the house. There may or may not be equity sharing, we don't know. The program's not decided. A lot of these details are going to be taken care of by discussions at the county board as well as with the different jurisdictions. As far as helping homeowners keep their homes, let's say a senior who's a neighbor, the home is falling apart, needs a new roof, but they don't have the income anymore on Social Security to build a roof, so it would be a loan to build a roof. Might be a loan for someone who's got a child that's living with them that's recently been disabled, is now in a wheelchair, they don't have a ramp, they don't have a handicap bathroom to get that child in the bathroom. So that would be an example of helping homeowners keep their homes. Homelessness, we're all aware of homelessness. That would support permanent housing, transitional housing, and emergency service facilities. I think you could also pick up some shelter, but that's all to be decided. And the last pot is an innovation and opportunity fund. That's an example of, let's say there's a property that's a local property apartment complex, and it originally got HUD funding. The HUD funding program is running out. They're not required to keep it affordable anymore. And in order to keep affordable, we have a special pot of money. If those opportunities came up, we could purchase a property and make sure it doesn't get converted to market rents. So that's the idea on that. We, as I said, we're not set in stone on this. The amount could change based upon feedback, the pots, different pots of money, and the uses could change. And the general idea is that these funds would be used by all the jurisdictions. They could be allocated upon population, so in this county, about 50%, 49% of the population is in the county. The rest of the balance, half the population is in 4 different cities, Scotts Valley, Santa Cruz, Capitola, and Watsonville. It could also be adjusted by the population, that's the population by poverty levels. It could be adjusted to account for the state allocation of regional housing needs assessment that is given to each jurisdiction, and they're responsible for outlining what parcels could be developed and making sure that they try to meet the allocation given by the state. The state does this every 8 years. It's based upon projected population growth. It's not to catch up with the housing we don't have. It's merely to provide for housing during that 8-year period of what they expect the growth is for every jurisdiction. So most of these funds, if not all, would be a revolving loan fund. I guess there could be some grants. I don't expect that, but these are all policies that would have to be decided. So steps forwards would be getting your input, going out for another poll most likely in the next month, and then going to the Board of Supervisors in June to get their approval and blessing and confirming a specific program about what the pots of money, how much money there would be, how much with each pot, and how it would work. And spending decisions would be not just the county, it would be each jurisdiction. So the city of Santa Cruz would have an allocation, as would each city and as would the county for the unincorporated areas. They would be responsible for spending their money. Looking at the Alameda County bond, they have done allocations, but if a jurisdiction runs out, they can go to the county and ask for more. And vice versa, if a jurisdiction is not, let's say Capitola doesn't know how to spend their money based upon their population, they don't have a lot of land left, they could give their money back to the county. The one pot that I think would be a little different, and we haven't flushed out the details, would be the homelessness. Homelessness is really, it's not a Capitola problem so much. I don't know that it's so a huge problem in Scotts Valley. We know it's a problem here in Santa Cruz. Smaller problem in Watsonville. I helped feed the homeless on Tuesday nights, the last Tuesday of the month with the Episcopal Church, and so we see the homeless come through the Salvation Army, and so we know we've got homelessness there, and a lot of homelessness we just don't know where people are. It's hard to tell, but certainly we know there's the biggest portion of homeless are here in Santa Cruz County, so that might be a pot that's more controlled by the county itself in conjunction with the city. And cities could use their money as well, but they could access those funds for homelessness. But that might be an example of not splitting up the pot in all the jurisdictions. So I kind of rambled probably, and I'm hoping I've given you enough details. I'm happy to take some questions about this bond, proposed bond, and then we also have 4 listening stations tonight. There are signs in the back that are based upon these 4 pots of fund, and people will be at each and they can answer more questions. So, Bill.
Jane, do you have any calculation as to the amount of housing that you get for in each of those categories, or the cost of some way to evaluate what we actually would get for $250 million?
Sure. You know, I haven't looked at for the whole pot. Homeless shelters are different because you're looking at beds, and the cost is going to be on that. On apartment units, it depends if you're doing SROs or studios for homeless that are in transitional or permanent supportive, and there's single people versus families and seniors. Seniors are going to be studios, ones maybe 2 bedrooms. So, I kind of looked at that. I didn't bring that along tonight. But it's going to be...
At some time, you could go through each of the 4 and do some statement of the expected impact for $100,000 or $1,000 or something that gives some kinds of
I mean,
return
just,
estimate.
I shouldn't be saying this, but off the top of my head, I think that we'd be doing, 100,000 plus or minus per unit. So if you take the 100,000 and the 250 million, that's going to give you a general idea. It's going to be plus or minus. And this is a bond that's going to be over a number of years, and construction costs have gone up tremendously in the last 2 years. And we don't know if that'll, even off or what the curve will be on that.
And if you put $100,000 into, for instance, affordable rental housing, how much are you reducing rents?
So the rents, so it's different stories here. So let's talk about home ownership first. Home ownership can be done for, if you're making 50% of the median in Santa Cruz County is just shy of $90,000. If you're making $45,000 a year, you're probably not going to be a homeowner. So home ownership is probably going to be geared to the lowest at 80% of this, of our median, so 72,000. And it might go up to 120%, which would be 108, I think, if I've got my math
For
right.
a family of four?
What's that?
For what size family? I have
These are for family of four.
Yeah,
And
133,000 for, I had 160.
okay, and then for family, and it might go up to 100 and 140 or 160%, which is known as workforce housing, and that would be Diana.
I don't know that
Okay,
number for
all
sure,
right.
but it's more than that.
So at 150%, we know that's 135,000. It's 90,000 on there.
Yeah, it's 89 too.
90, so that's the wrong number, but okay.
Yeah.
It's 135,000, and then it's back at the 108,000 for the, so we're in that range. Let's say we're anywhere from 70,000 up to 130,000 for home ownership. And then I'm going to finish, and I'll get this question second. For this, if you're in the affordable housing development area that I'm in, tax credits are the main source of funding. Up until this year, you've only been able to develop from 30% of the median. So that would be 27,000. It could go a little lower, so we're really talking about people making more than 20,000, up to 60%. So that would be about 55,000 here. There was a change this year, and now we can go up to 80%. So that takes us up to 72,000. We still have to average out our affordability at 55%, but we can have 80%, so we can reach up to some of those people that are teachers that make too much to get an affordable housing rental unit, but don't make enough. So that's been a great change. So Carol?
Okay, I only had two questions. You
Yes.
already answered one of them.
Okay.
My main question is why a property tax as opposed to a sales tax? So for example, I have a son who is a teacher, who is a new homeowner, and a property tax will make his housing much less affordable. So I wondered, what was the rationale behind that?
So it's actually harder to pass a parcel tax rather than a sales tax, because we need 67% of the vote. So we're not trying to kill ourselves here, but a sales tax is limited. There's only a certain amount you can go in a county, and the county or jurisdictions are going to look at, do I want to spend that on? We've had Measure D, for instance, in this area for transportation. The city of Santa Cruz is looking at 4% sales tax. I don't know if the county's going to go, but if they want to use that for other purposes, then there's a limit on how much sales tax be. I think it's 9.5. Do you guys know that?
10.
I think it's 9 something. I think it's 9.5. I don't think it's 10. So 9.75. Thank you, Glenn.
Jake, would you mind quick second?
Yeah.
Quick
Yeah.
second. Hi, everybody. My name is Matt. I'm with Monterey Bay Economic Partnership, so part of the working group that we've all been working together on. And we do want to wrap this up in a couple of minutes because we really want to be able to do some more detailed discussions in the back. So one thing I wanted to mention in terms of the discussion about, parcel tax, what kind of tax and exactly how that's going to boil down to the exact figures, that is really going to play out, right? One of the things that we're doing is really modeling this process after very successful efforts in Southern California, in the Bay Area, other places that have kind of done this already, right? And they have some of the very same dynamics that we're all feeling in our region, right? Exploding rents, very low vacancy rates, people not being able to live and work, right? And play where we've all been accustomed to, and people really just distressed. So that's really what this is all about, is trying to alleviate these really just tremendous impacts. And I'll mention that part of sizing this resource for the community is not to, of course we want to make sure we're not overburdening ourselves, right? And we want it to be feasible and be able to move forward, and we want to be able to impact the thing that we're trying to talk about here is the housing situation. And we're not alone in that. Again, we're modeling it after other successful efforts, and the state is trying to step up and saying, look, there's going to be some real dollars in coming down the pipeline, and even some federal dollars. Jane was talking about the tax credit program that is still there, still got bipartisan support. We expect to get our fair share, but part of the reason, part of the requirement for us to kind of figure out how to come up with local resources, when we had the redevelopment agency here in Santa Cruz, is one of the most successful redevelopment agencies in the state, in the county and the city both. And without that resource, we're not going to get our fair share of the state and federal dollars. And that's the other part that's really important not to lose sight of, is we have to have a local match resource in order to get those state and federal dollars here. Very much the same way we do with transportation dollars, parks, and other resources. That's how it works. And so, again, I don't want to cut off these questions. If we want to take a couple more, that's fine, but we want to keep it kind of high level for right here and then move on to
I was actually hoping we could move very soon here.
Okay.
It seems like some of these discussions could happen.
Well, I want to just take the people who have questions, because I think it's important that we take a few more questions. We've got plenty of time here. We've got another 40 minutes, so.
Right, the format was to get.
Right, I know, but we've kind of changed the format a little bit too, so let's take questions. So I think we need to do that, and Matt's got some good points. Redevelopment used to bring $1 billion into the different jurisdictions throughout the county. The new permanent source of the Jobs and Housing and Jobs Act that was passed in September is bringing a quarter of that, $250 million. So we've got to be able to match some funds coming in. Stanley?
Yeah, I came to the last meeting that was in this room about the same topic, and the question came up: how many units do you think you can build for that $250 million? 2,500. I feel. Okay,
I'd say 2,000, 2,500 is about.
Are there 2,000 or 2,500 units available in parcels that are zoned right now, or do you have to rezone? And if you have to rezone, which I think you do, and redo the general plan before you do the zoning, how do you overcome the NIMBY opposition, which has stifled the city planned higher density along transit corridors that was shot down? The county planning commission just approved putting in the Nissan dealership, where the neighborhood plan already said it was going to be housing above commercial. It's going the wrong direction.
This is an easy work. And
it seems like it's an attitude problem among the leadership.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, it's not easy work. We're pushing to get this done, and we're going to see denser properties probably. Downtown specific plan is an example. So you've got some good points there, but we can't just say, oh, there's NIMBYism and we can't do this. So Mark.
Hi. Just want to ask you, where in Southern California are these programs actually being implemented?
When you say these programs, I'm sorry.
The housing.
Bonds.
Yeah.
LA did one. San Diego, I think, did one.
Right, LA, and then also San Diego is pursuing.
Now, I used to be a county planner in both of those jurisdictions for many, many years. I know the land use intimately. And those two jurisdictions are not at all the same as Santa Cruz. We have a lot more down-zoned open space. I don't see how you can compare the two. There simply is not enough land. Okay?
We're not, I'm sorry.
Well,
Sir,
yeah.
if you're asking me a question real quick.
Okay, so I already know the answer. The second question is, also I don't approve coming here and dividing us into other.
Right.
You know, that's not.
Okay, well, we're taking questions.
Okay, the second question is, by raising property taxes, you're actually raising the cost of housing for everyone.
Yeah.
Okay? This is exactly what happened in Rio College's Measure Q. It was defeated. The people got tired of their property taxes going up. The average property tax is now almost $6,000 or $7,000 a year.
Yes.
No one can afford it, particularly the seniors.
And what's your question?
And the question is, why aren't we going back to the accommodation sales tax or a different source of funding? And another question is, my third question is, most of this development is going to be in the city, and why are we taxing county residents?
Okay,
Thank you.
I don't agree that most of it's going to be in the city. The city has a small percentage, the county has over half the population. We've talked about, if I can answer please, we've talked about the sales tax. There's a limit on sales tax. We didn't think that would get pushed through at all. And doing nothing is not an answer. I think, you know, for me, I look at this housing bond as not only for housing, but think of how it can affect traffic. If you're living in Watsonville because it's cheaper to live than here, and you commute up to Capitola 41st, or you commute to Santa Cruz, or you commute to Scotts Valley, I think if we have more housing in appropriate places, it's going to help that. And I think that affordable housing also goes hand in hand with health and education, and I think we're going to be improving what we can for our students.
I think your program may be a little bit ill-timed. You know, we've got $1.3 billion proposed by David Liu of San Francisco, specifically to reinstate essentially development funds to go back to the cities and counties. And there's also another measure that's coming up that was also announced in March of this year, specifically for student housing, to build student housing for college students. Separate and apart from all the other redevelopment funds. And I can tell you, you know, we're tired of the taxes. I mean, I'm a property owner. I've already had myself hamstrung by the city in this unjust eviction deal and this proposed rent control. But my rents are already very low. But on a personal,
Glenn, can you just wait a second, please? Please don't interrupt him. I appreciate it.
And on a personal level, you know, on my personal home, my insurance went up in a few years with no losses from $1,000 a year to over $4,000 because we had an illegal pot farm start a fire and somebody else on a trash pile starting a mountain on fire.
Do you have a question?
So my question is, can you speak to the redundancy of your program based upon these other measures that are on the ballot that are accomplishing essentially the same thing?
I don't think there's only one measure on the ballot that I know of, and that's the housing measure, $1 billion for vets and $3 billion for housing throughout the whole state. And you're going to need local matches. And if we don't have local funds to match that, we're not going to be accessed.
Could you look up David Liu in his $1.3 billion proposal?
That's not on the ballot, and it's not.
Well, they're trying to get it.
They're trying to get it. Yeah, they're 20, 30 some things, but Jim, I'm sorry, you had a question, so we can.
So my question is, if the bond is passed, and I'm wondering who's going to oversee allocate the money? For example, the city, who's the organization and who are the?
So the program would be approved prior to going on the ballot. As far as how it would work, each jurisdiction in the county would be in charge of their pots of funding, and the county overall would be most likely in charge of the homeless, but it could be different. So they would create oversight committees, and or you know, each could handle slightly differently. I'm just going to take two more questions because you've been waiting.
Thank you. How will this mesh with the county's existing Measure J? Developers have to pay for 15% affordable? And would developers with projects in the works now, if this passes, be able to cash in on this?
So the inclusionary is a totally different program, and this is above and beyond that. It's outside of that.
So this money would not go to developers?
That actually goes to some comments before, is that, look, there's existing policies, and guess what? There's actually projects right now that would move forward if they had access to some of this subsidy. So this is actually critically important to addressing all the issues that these kind of buckets, these programs, you know, this is just one very big program. This is about our workforce here in this region and in the community to address the needs that we know that are out there. And so there's actual projects, there are developments, apartments, homes for formerly homeless, there's first-time homebuyer programs that are made possible because of very thoughtful, progressive policies that the city and the leadership here for years and decades have said, you know what, it's important to create affordable housing opportunities for our community, and they're unfunded. You basically have kind of an unfunded mandate, essentially, right now.
With the
And
loss
this is
of redevelopment.
with the loss of
it's a gap in
redevelopment. So this is a
financing
resource, this is a critical resource to actually make good on that unfunded mandate. That's a great way to think about it, actually.
Okay, we're going to take the last question. I can't read your name.
No, it's okay, Christina.
Christina.
I just was hoping you can elaborate a little bit on the Independent Community Oversight Committee. I know that in Santa Clara County with Measure A, they have an Independent Citizens Oversight Committee, which I'm guessing is the same. Hopefully you modeled it after that measure, because they have 9 members, and then the county assessor is also on there for 3-year terms. Actually, the term length is varied. Can you tell me a little bit about how the Citizen Oversight Committee is going to be formed? Will these people be appointed? Will they be elected?
I can't flush that out right now.
Okay.
We're still taking comments, and then a lot of these decisions are made at the county board of supervisors level and with each jurisdiction. So that's the county board is the one who's going to approve this and approve the program, and the cities have an input in that too. So that's a conversation. There have been informal conversations, but I don't think it's been finalized. You know, we're still taking comments on how so you like the plan that was done in Santa Clara?
Well, I think that it shows, it's a good example.
Good. Okay.
I mean, I haven't looked into it as much as, I would like to, but I would be sure, because I think it's really important that the
Yes.
people that are putting this forward say, here are the checks and balances we
Right.
have in
I agree.
place.
Yeah.
There won't be mismanagement of funds. I think we all want greater fiscal efficiency.
Mhm.
And I think the safeguard to that is going to be this oversight committee.
I
It's
think
going to
that's
be
a-
critical.
Yeah,
Great point.
that's a great point. Community engagement is absolutely critical at each step of this level, and that's part of the reason for having this robust discussion, being able to have questions fielded here in a larger group, and also more detailed discussions. People prefer different formats, right? And to your point, Santa Clara is a great example. You all know or are familiar with that county. Tell me how different Gilroy is to Palo Alto. Well, those voters came together, and and everybody in between, San Jose and Santa Clara and everybody in between, said, you know what, we are not going to be the homeless capital of this country. And they were for a minute. I don't know if many of you are aware of that. People used to fly over and see the largest homeless encampment in the country. And it was actually embarrassing for them, because they were trying to expand their Tokyo, Japan line and everything else, and people would fly over, well, what's going on here? We fly over other countries and we see shanty towns, and I didn't know that was here. This is one of the richest, most vibrant communities in the whole world. That's happening here, and guess what? That's happening in this community. And I think that that's unacceptable, and raise your hand if you think that's acceptable to have here in this community, right? So no one's going to agree to that. We have to find solutions. This is bold, it's hard, it's a heavy lift, but that's the kind of stuff that needs to happen in order for us to deal with this decades-long issue of pent-up demand. So I hope that you'll join us, and if you have further questions, we're going to have further discussions here in this room in the back. So I don't know if you want to say anything else.
There's the 4 listing stations. We appreciate you coming tonight. I'm available to answer questions. People at each listing station can answer questions. We know this is not easy work, and we know that many of us have been working on this, and we just feel that it's a community effort that will improve our community, and we hope that we'll find a program that people can support. So thank you very much.